You ever get that feeling where you step outside with your morning coffee and your lawn looks like a swamp? That was me about 3 weeks back. The ground was totally saturated, little pools of water everywhere, and the garden hose felt kind of warm, like it had just been running. Now the thing is, I live solo. No kids, no roommates, and definitely no magical garden gnomes pulling a fast one with my water supply. Just me, my caffeine fix, and a lawn that apparently waters itself. At first, I figured maybe the automatic sprinkler timer was on the fritz. Then I remembered I don't even have sprinklers, just the one hose. That's when I started noticing more weird stuff. My water bill had skyrocketed. I'm not talking a little jump. It had freaking spiked, like I was filling up an Olympic-sized pool every night. But I sure wasn't. All that's out back is a kinda sad tomato plant and my beat-up old grill. So, where in the world was all that water going? I started asking around the neighborhood. My neighbors are all decent enough folks, except for one. And yeah, her name really was Karen. She'd moved in a couple of months prior and immediately started acting like she owned the place. I mean, she wasn't even the HOA president, but you wouldn't know it by the way she strutted around with her clipboard, inspecting everyone's yards like she was the freaking gatekeeper of paradise. She'd already filed complaints about some poor guy's shutter color, demanded someone else mow their lawn shorter, and even yelled at the mail carrier for parking too aggressively in front of her mailbox. Total menace. But still, I didn't think she'd actually steal from me, until I saw it with my own 2 eyes. It was a Saturday morning. I'd just gotten back from a grocery store, and as I was pulling into my driveway, I caught her red-handed. There she was, decked out in her floral print blouse and this enormous sun hat, dragging my hose across my yard like it was hers to begin with. She hooks it up to one of those portable pressure washers and starts cleaning her front porch. No shame whatsoever. No permission asked. No nothing. Just straight up stealing my water in broad daylight like she's the one paying for it. I just sat there in my car, watching, completely dumbfounded. She looks up, gives me this friendly little wave like we're best buddies, and shouts, "Hope you don't mind. Just a quick rinse." I didn't even have a chance to get a word in edgewise. She just turns right back around and keeps on spraying. I'm gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide if I should confront her or just pretend I didn't see anything at all. I went with the second option, went inside my house, and just stared at my faucet like it had betrayed me or something. Later that evening, I went and knocked on her door. Nicely. I asked if she needed help with her water line or something. She just laughed and goes, "Oh no. I just like your hose better. The water pressure is amazing." I figured it's all community property anyway, right? Community property. I almost choked on my own tongue. Last I checked, my place wasn't some kind of commune, and the water sure as heck wasn't falling from the sky for free. It was coming out of my bank account. I told her politely but firmly that I really didn't appreciate her using my hose without at least asking me first. She gives me this sweet little smile, tilts her head, and says, "Well, I'm sure the HOA won't mind one bit. We're all supposed to share and be good neighbors," she says, then slams the door right in my face. Just like that, the conversation was over. Now, here's the deal about me. I'm not a fighter. I don't go around causing a scene. I don't like to yell and make things worse. I'm a solver of problems. So I decided to play by the rules. I emailed the HOA with pictures of Karen using my hose, like a good little citizen. I explained the whole situation, included a copy of my water bill, and asked for some clarity on this community property thing she was talking about. A few days later, I got a reply. It said, and I swear I'm not making this up, "Thank you for your concern." Now, that's HOA code for suck it up, buttercup. You're on your own. So, I tried again. I bought a lock for the hose. Simple solution, right? Karen couldn't use the water if she couldn't get to it. Problem solved, yeah? Nope. The very next morning, the lock was gone. Not just unlocked, gone, like someone had snapped it off. Clean break. Someone took a bolt cutter to that thing. I stood there, staring at the sliced metal like I was at a crime scene. I even looked for fingerprints, which, to be honest, I wouldn't have even known what to do with. But in my gut, I knew exactly who did it. Sure enough, across the street, there she was, Karen herself, out there using the hose again. washing her giant SUV like she was starring in a car commercial. Water spraying everywhere like it was free or something. Like it wasn't draining my damn bank account. I confronted her again, this time a little less friendly. I asked about the lock. She goes, "Oh, that thing? It was a safety hazard. Somebody could trip." And then she smiles, flips her hair back, and keeps scrubbing the tires of her car. I couldn't believe it. I went back inside, plopped down on my couch, and just stared at the wall for a good 10 minutes. The HOA wouldn't help. Karen was seemingly untouchable, and I was now basically paying for her car washes and a fancy house water routine. That's when I had the idea to install a camera. Nothing fancy, just a little motion-activated security cam, tucked up under the gutter near the spigot. If I couldn't stop her, maybe I could at least document her thievery. Maybe, just maybe, the HOA would actually take me seriously. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd catch her doing something so ridiculous that the internet would take care of it for me. Because if there's one thing the internet loves, it's an entitled jerk getting caught red-handed in high definition. 2 days later, I had the footage crystal clear. Karen creeping into my yard like some kind of cartoon villain, dragging my hose with that same smug grin she always had. And the best part? She used it to water her plants, fill up a kiddie pool, and then wash her dog. All before I even woke up. It was a full-blown Karen production, and I had the whole thing on camera. I posted a clip to this local neighborhood forum with the title, "Neighbor Steals My Water Every Morning." The video exploded. People were pissed. Some were laughing. Some gave me advice. One dude even sent me a link to a motion-activated sprinkler, the kind that blasts you with water if you get too close. But the absolute best part? Karen saw it. I knew she saw it because the very next morning, she was knocking on my front door. No sun hat, no smile, just pure, unadulterated rage. She starts yelling at me, was violating her privacy, destroying her reputation, and making life unbearable for her. I told her she was trespassing on my property, stealing my water, and costing me money. She just huffed, crossed her arms, and said the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. "Do something about it. I dare you." And that was the exact moment everything changed. That dare sparked something in me, a fire I didn't even realize I had. Because I was absolutely going to do something about it. Something she wouldn't see coming in a million years. Something she'd never forget, not for the rest of her life. If Karen wanted water, oh, she was going to get it. All right. The next morning, I woke up with a totally different attitude. No more Mr. Nice Neighbor. No more emails to the HOA. No more wimpy locks. Karen threw down the gauntlet, and I was going to pick it up. I was going to do something she'd regret every single time she turned on a faucet. But revenge takes planning, and I wasn't about to just jump in without a strategy. First, I needed to see just how far she was willing to go. Was she only using my hose when she thought I wasn't home? Or was she bold enough to steal water no matter what? I called out of work and spent the day inside, blinds closed, coffee in hand, just waiting and watching. Sure enough, right around 10:30 in the morning, I heard the quiet hiss of the spigot being turned on and the sound of the hose being dragged across my lawn. I peeked through the blinds. There she was again, decked out in yoga pants and that same smug look on her face, spraying down her driveway like it was her own private car wash business. This time, I walked outside, phone in my hand, pretending to be texting someone. She saw me, hesitated for a split second, then kept right on going like I wasn't even there. I didn't say a word, just recorded her. She didn't even flinch. It was like she was trying to prove that I couldn't stop her, that my complaints, my camera, my warnings didn't mean a thing. When she was done, she waved the hose at me and says, "See, works great. You should thank me for keeping it in good condition." I faked a smile, went back inside, and watched the video again. I didn't even have to zoom in. The footage was clear, direct, and completely incriminating. But even with all the evidence, I knew the HOA wasn't going to do anything. I'd already tried that route, and it was a dead end. It was time for a different kind of justice. That afternoon, I uploaded the new video to the neighborhood Facebook group, but this time I went with a catchier title. Local Karen turns neighbor's hose into personal water park. Within hours, the comments were flooding in. It turns out everyone had a Karen story, but mine seemed to really resonate with people. They were laughing, making fun of her, suggesting all kinds of crazy punishments, and a few even offered legal advice. A lot of folks were really ticked off that the HOA hadn't done anything to stop her. The video really took off, getting shared way beyond the neighborhood group. It ended up on Reddit. It ended up on YouTube. Strangers from other states were tagging their friends. And Karen? Oh, she definitely noticed. The next morning, she was standing in her yard with 2 members of the HOA board, pointing right at my house. I watched from my window as she was putting on some kind of act, like she was the victim. I saw her gesturing wildly, even pretending to wipe away a tear. A few hours later, I found a letter shoved in my mail slot. A formal warning from the HOA for unauthorized surveillance and hostile behavior towards a fellow resident. I almost started laughing hysterically. Hostile behavior? I hadn't even raised my voice, the nerve of them. They were more upset about me recording her stealing my water than about the actual theft itself. So that was it. I was officially done playing by their rules. If the system wasn't going to help me, I was going to make my own. I started brainstorming ideas. I thought about alarms, fake warning signs, silly pranks, but none of them felt like enough. I wanted something poetic. Something that would leave a lasting impression, not just a temporary mess. That's when fate decided to lend a hand. I was driving past a construction site on the edge of the neighborhood when I saw a crew setting up a temporary sewage tank. Not just your run-of-the-mill sewage tank either. This thing was industrial grade, the kind they use for portable toilets and large-scale waste containment. And that's when it hit me. A terrible, brilliant, and deeply satisfying idea. I pulled the car over and struck up a conversation with one of the workers, asked a few casual questions, telling him I was a homeowner dealing with some tricky drainage problems and might need a similar tank for a landscaping experiment I was planning. He laughed, but he seemed like a decent guy, and after a little chatting, I slipped him a few bucks to let me have access to the tank for a single evening, strictly for testing purposes. He agreed with a shrug. As long as I didn't mess with the pump, he didn't really care what I did. That was all I needed to hear. Back home, I got out my toolbox. I built this little adapter thing that connected my outside water spigot to a second hose, one that I ran underground and hid behind some bushes, which was connected directly to the sewage tank. It was pure genius, if I may say so myself. To anyone looking at it from the outside, my hose looked completely normal. But when someone turned it on, expecting clean, pressurized water, they were going to be in for one heck of a surprise. A brown, smelly, and unforgettable surprise. I tested it once, just to make sure everything was working, using a separate line and a sealed bucket. The results were even better than I had hoped. The smell alone could have knocked out a small elephant. Now, all I had to do was wait. I set everything up one night, under the cover of darkness, made sure my cameras were rolling, and left the main hose out where Karen always found it. The bait was set. The trap was armed. And just as I suspected, the next morning around 10:30, I heard it. That familiar hiss of the hose being turned on. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the live camera feed. There she was, dragging the hose across my yard like she always did. She didn't even bother looking around this time. She was that confident, that entitled. She hooked the hose up to one of those new rotating sprinklers, the fancy kind that spins around and sprays water in a wide circle, and set it right in the middle of her front lawn. Then, she turned the spigot on. It was slow at first. A weird gurgling sound. A sputter, like it was struggling to get started. She tilted her head, looking confused. Then it hit. A jet of thick, dark, putrid liquid shot out of the sprinkler in a wide arc, spraying all over her lawn, her patio, and most importantly, her pristine white wicker furniture. The sprinkler spun once, twice. By the third rotation, she was screaming. Screaming so loud, I could hear her even through my closed windows. Through my closed windows. She took off running toward the spigot, slipping and sliding on the grass, which was quickly turning into a smelly, brown swamp. Neighbors started cautiously poking their heads out of their houses, peering around, like they weren't sure what they were seeing. Some were gagging and trying to cover their noses. One guy actually dropped his coffee cup in shock. I even saw someone start filming the whole thing on their phone. Karen was wrestling with the hose like it was a giant snake trying to strangle her. She finally managed to rip it away from the sprinkler, but not before another blast of sewage hit her shins. She was completely covered, screaming, coughing, and just generally losing it. And best of all, there were witnesses. Real live witnesses who had seen the whole crazy thing go down. I just sat there watching it all on the security cam feed, savoring every single second of it. This wasn't just revenge. This was a true work of art. Later that day, I walked outside, pretending to check my mail. She saw me and absolutely lost it. Stormed right over to my yard, still wearing those ruined sandals and covered in sludge, shouting about lawsuits and biohazards and all kinds of threats. I didn't say a word back to her. I just gave her a smile and said, "You told me to do something about it, so I did." Her face went red, then kind of green, then back to red again. She stomped off, yelling something about calling the HOA. I just waved at her and said, "Be sure to tell them the water wasn't stolen this time." That night, I uploaded the security cam footage, and within a matter of hours, it basically broke the internet. Karen was now officially famous, and definitely not in a good way. By the next morning, my entire neighborhood had completely changed. People weren't just whispering about her anymore. They were straight up laughing about it. From the moment Karen's sewage sprinkler show hit the internet, her reputation took a nosedive so fast, it could have cracked the sidewalk. The videos spread like wildfire, especially after someone edited in dramatic music and even some slow-motion zooms of her facial expressions. To be clear, I didn't post the footage myself this time. Someone else did, probably one of the neighbors who had caught the whole thing live. I could tell from the angle of the video. It was filmed from an upper-floor balcony across the street. Within 12 hours, the clip had made it to Reddit, TikTok, and even those Facebook mom groups with titles like, "When Karens Get What They Deserve," and "Neighborhood Justice at its Finest." But as satisfying as the public reaction was, I wasn't quite done yet. See, the sewage stunt was really just phase one of my plan. It worked beautifully, no doubt, but Karen wasn't the kind of person to learn from her mistakes. If anything, the whole sewage mess had just triggered her deeper instincts for retaliation. I knew her silence wouldn't last for long, and I was definitely right. That afternoon, a very official-looking envelope showed up at my door. Inside was a letter printed in all capital letters, filled with legal-sounding words and empty threats. She accused me of intentional sabotage, personal endangerment, and even biological assault. She even claimed that her poor dog got sick from the incident, even though I had clear video footage of the animal being nowhere near the spray zone. I almost felt bad for her lawyer if she actually hired one, because anyone who read the whole story would have laughed her right out of their office. But I took the letter seriously in one way. It confirmed what I already knew. Karen wasn't going to let this go. So I started planning phase 2. It wouldn't be another prank. It had to be something smarter, something permanent. The ultimate shutdown. First, I really beefed up my camera system. I added 2 more motion sensing cameras around the sides of the house, and even put one right above the spigot itself, hidden inside of a fake birdhouse. I wanted a full 360-degree view of everything that was going on, just in case she got any clever ideas. Then I visited the construction site again, just to thank the workers, and casually offered to have a pizza delivered for them, my treat. Keeping them happy meant keeping access to that sewage tank for a little longer. They still thought I was just testing out different fertilizer techniques. I wasn't about to correct them on that. Back at home, I seriously upgraded the hose setup. The first version had been a bit clunky, with all the manual routing and careful timing it required. This time, I installed a remote switch inside my garage. The switch controlled a valve splitter that could seamlessly switch between the normal water flow and the sewage tank line. Everything was smooth, efficient, and completely hidden underground with a new patch of grass. It was probably overkill, but I wasn't taking any chances. If Karen ever dared to use the hose again, she'd have absolutely no idea which kind of water she was going to get. It was like a game of Russian roulette, but with garden hoses. But then, something totally unexpected happened. Karen just vanished. Well, not completely. She still lived across the street, obviously. But she didn't leave her house. For 2 days straight, her curtains stayed drawn, her car stayed parked, and her yard remained completely untouched. No hose theft, no yelling, no walking around with her clipboard. It was unsettling, like the calm right before a hurricane hits. And sure enough, on the 3rd day, the storm arrived. A notice from the HOA landed at my doorstep. This one wasn't just a friendly warning. It was an actual fine. It stated that I had violated community health protocols and had intentionally created a hazardous environment for a fellow resident. The amount they were fining me? $600. I just stood there, staring at the paper in disbelief. I immediately called the HOA office, demanding an explanation, and got passed around to about 3 different board members. Finally, one of them admitted that Karen had filed a formal complaint, backed up by photographic evidence, and even 2 supposed witnesses, claiming that I had threatened her with some kind of chemical attack. I couldn't even bring myself to laugh. It was just too ridiculous. I offered to show them my full camera footage, with the timestamps and everything, and even the documentation from the construction site, proving that the hose was accessed solely for my own property. They said they would review it all at the next board meeting, which, by the way, wasn't scheduled to happen for another month. It was a total setup. Karen knew exactly how the HOA worked. Slow, bureaucratic, and easy to manipulate. She was using the system as her own personal shield. But she had made one crucial mistake. She assumed that I would just let it go, that I would either pay the fine or just wait quietly for my name to be cleared. She didn't realize that while she was hiding behind paperwork, I was already digging in, doing my own research. Over the next few days, I started doing some serious homework. I combed through public records, dug up all of the HOA bylaws, and even paid a visit to the county clerk's office. It wasn't about obsession at this point. It was about precision. And then I finally found it. A small technicality buried deep within the association rules. In Section 4.12b, any homeowner caught trespassing on another resident's property without express permission, particularly for the use of utilities, will be subject to immediate investigation, fines, and potential removal from the benefits of HOA membership. There it was, my golden ticket. Karen had walked onto my property countless times, and I had the video proof to back it up. I had timestamps. I even had witnesses, unlike her imaginary ones. I printed everything out, stapled it all together into a thick packet, and mailed copies not only to the HOA board, but also to a few other residents who had complained about her in the past. I didn't want to start a war. I wanted to start a rebellion. Within 2 days, one of my neighbors came knocking on my door. He was a really soft-spoken guy named Glenn, who lived a few houses down. He said he had been fed up with Karen ever since she reported his backyard hammock for being too colorful. He thanked me for exposing her. Then another neighbor chimed in, and then another. It turned out that Karen had made enemies everywhere. I had just lit the fuse on the whole powder keg. Soon, the entire street was buzzing with activity. People were comparing stories about her, sharing notes on her behavior, and passing around the security footage like baseball cards. I didn't have to lift another finger at that point. Karen had spent months acting like she was the queen of the block, and now her whole kingdom was rising up against her. The final nail in the coffin came when someone leaked a recording of a private HOA meeting, where Karen had been trying to manipulate the board members. Her voice was unmistakable, and her tone was as entitled as ever. The recording ended with her screaming about being targeted by jealous neighbors, who just couldn't handle seeing a strong woman in charge. That clip, combined with her sewage sprinkler video, created a perfect storm of public outrage and ridicule. Karen finally came outside 2 days later, wearing sunglasses, no makeup, and looking visibly shaken. She didn't yell. She didn't steal any more water. She just got into her car and drove away, without even bothering to look at anyone. For the first time in weeks, the whole street felt calm, peaceful, almost like it had before she arrived. But I wasn't foolish enough to think it was really over. People like Karen don't just disappear. They usually retreat, regroup, and start planning their next move. That's why I left the remote valve switch active, just in case. That's why I kept the camera system running 24/7. If she ever decided to try to pull anything on me again, I would be ready for her. Because this wasn't just about the water anymore. This was about setting boundaries. And Karen had finally learned that crossing mine would come with consequences. 3 days passed by in this really eerie silence. Karen's house sat completely still, almost like it was under some kind of quarantine. No cars in the driveway. No music coming from the patio. No garden hose snaking across my lawn like a thief in the night. It almost felt too quiet, like it was all a setup. I knew Karen well enough by this point to understand that she wasn't just licking her wounds and moving on. She was the kind of person who couldn't back down from anything, not because she was particularly brave, but because she just couldn't stand losing control over things. And after the whole sewage sprinkler incident, she had lost everything. Her dignity, her spotless patio, and her reign as the queen of the cul-de-sac. So when I heard the knock on my door just after noon, I didn't even flinch. I already knew that it would be her. What I didn't expect was for her to bring back up with her. Standing there beside her on my front porch were 2 members of the HOA board, one holding a clipboard, and the other carrying a thick folder. Karen, dressed like she was going to a courtroom drama, instead of just confronting a neighbor, kept her arms crossed tightly, her jaw clenched, and her eyes locked on mine, like she was already rehearsing a victory speech in her head. The guy with the clipboard cleared his throat and announced that they were there to discuss an escalating property dispute and a potential biohazard incident. I asked if they would like to come inside, but Karen quickly snapped back, saying that she didn't feel safe entering my home. I laughed not out loud, but on the inside, because I knew exactly what this was. Her final attempt to try and paint herself as the victim of the whole situation. They handed me a formal complaint, which was 3 pages long, filled with exaggerated language and accusations. Karen claimed that I had weaponized sewage, that I had created an environmental hazard, and that she was now experiencing extreme emotional distress from what she described as a carefully orchestrated public humiliation campaign. She even went so far as to claim that the stench had seeped into the foundation of her home, which really made me wonder if she even knew how plumbing actually worked. I just let them keep talking, nodding my head every now and then, waiting for the moment I knew was coming. And of course it did. Karen demanded that I pay for the complete cleanup of her lawn and patio, that I issue a formal apology to her, and that I attend a mandatory conflict resolution session, arranged and supervised by the HOA. The second she finished listing her ridiculous demands, I raised a finger to stop her and told them I had something to show them. I stepped back inside my house, grabbed my printed folder full of evidence, and brought it back outside. Everything was right there in black and white. Time-stamped video footage of Karen trespassing on my property without my permission multiple times on multiple dates, always with my garden hose in her hands. I included copies of my water bill statements, screenshots of neighborhood posts about her, and even a list of other neighbors who had submitted complaints about her behavior in the past year. And then I handed them the HOA bylaw that she had so clearly violated, with the relevant section highlighted in bright yellow: trespassing with use of private utilities without consent. The clipboard guy took his time reading through everything. I could see Karen's face getting paler and paler as he flipped through the pages of my folder. The other board member leaned in close, whispering something under his breath, and I could feel the entire mood start to shift. Karen started interrupting, claiming that the videos were manipulated, that I was stalking her, and that I had created a hostile environment long before the sewage sprinkler incident had ever happened. But this time, they weren't buying it. The board members said that they needed some time to review all of the material I had presented, and that they would call a special meeting within the week to address the issue. Karen immediately protested, saying that she deserved immediate action. But this time, they completely ignored her protests. The second that they walked away, Karen turned to me one last time. Her voice was quieter now, but sharper and almost trembling with rage. She told me that she was going to make sure that everyone knew the kind of person I really was. I just looked at her and replied, They already do. And with that, she turned around and stomped back to her house, muttering something under her breath that I didn't even care to try and figure out. That night, I posted a calm, fact-based summary of the events in the same neighborhood forum where the videos had originally gone viral. I made a point of leaving out any sarcasm or exaggeration and just focused on presenting the facts. I explained how she had trespassed on my property, how she had been stealing my water, how I had tried to resolve the issue through the HOA, and how I had been forced to protect my property when the system failed me. The response I got was overwhelming. People really rallied behind me, sharing their own Karen stories all over again. One neighbor even offered to mow my lawn for free, just to thank me for standing up to her. Another one left a freshly baked pie on my doorstep with a sticky note that read, "You're a legend." 2 days later, the special HOA meeting finally took place. It wasn't open to the public, but word about what was happening spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood. Karen showed up with stacks of printed documents and a folder filled with what she claimed were legal threats that she could use against me. But all of her efforts just crumbled under the weight of the evidence I had presented. The board reviewed my security footage, they reviewed the HOA bylaws, and they issued an official HOA warning to Karen. She was fined $500 for multiple trespassing violations and was warned that any future incidents like this would result in the suspension of her HOA membership privileges. They didn't exactly apologize to me directly, but I could definitely tell that they were backpedaling hard from their earlier support of her. She had finally become a liability that they could no longer afford to protect. And the best part of it all? Her little fan club within the HOA started to dissolve right before my eyes. The board member who used to have her back silently resigned the very next week. Karen, who had once been the self-proclaimed neighborhood sheriff, now walked her dog with her head down, carefully avoiding eye contact with everyone she passed. Everyone. Her driveway stayed dry. Her patio stayed dirty. And the garden hose? She never touched it again. But even then, the whole thing wasn't completely over just yet. Karen tried one last, really pathetic move. She filed a complaint with the city, claiming that I had illegally installed a sewage connection in my yard. I got a visit from a city inspector who, after checking out the whole setup and laughing for a good 5 minutes straight, told me that I was completely in the clear. He said that the hose line wasn't permanent and that there was no violation of any kind. He even added, totally off the record of course, that he wished more people would handle their problems with as much creativity as I had. I offered him a bottle of water as he was leaving, but he declined, joking, only if it's not coming from that hose. By this point, my video had gotten over 4 million views online. I was getting requests for interviews left and right. One guy even emailed me, asking if I would consider selling t-shirts with the phrase, "Hose Justice," printed on them. My neighbors were treating me like some kind of local hero, but I really didn't feel very heroic. I just felt relieved. Finally, after weeks of pure madness, I had some peace and quiet in my life again. And yet, part of me still remained on high alert. Because people like Karen don't just disappear without a trace. They regroup, they wait, and they try to find new ways to bite back when you least expect it. So, I left the remote valve switch installed, just in case. I kept the camera system running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I even set out a new garden hose, all shiny and tempting, coiled up like a trap, just waiting to spring. Not because I actually thought she would try anything again, but because if she did, I wanted to be completely ready for her. Because now everyone in the neighborhood knew one thing for sure. If Karen ever came for my garden hose again, she had better bring a mop with her. It has been nearly a month now since the sewage storm hit the Karen's kingdom. Her house, which had once been the epicenter of noise, complaints, and unsolicited advice, now stood there like a forgotten monument to suburban tyranny. The porch lights stayed off at night, the curtains were drawn tighter than ever, and not once did her shoes ever touch my lawn again. My trusty garden hose lay coiled peacefully on its holder, untouched and gleaming under the sun like a retired warrior who had seen the battlefield and had definitely earned its rest. For the first time in what felt like forever, my mornings were actually quiet. No more unexpected spikes in the water bill, no more angry confrontations over a simple gardening tool, and no more being made to feel like a trespasser on my own property. Life had finally returned to normal, or at least to something that closely resembled it. The neighbors greeted me with actual smiles, now not just casual nods, but genuine acknowledgement of my existence. People who used to look the other way whenever Karen walked by now went out of their way to stop and chat with me for a few minutes. Glenn, the hammock guy, even invited me over for a backyard barbecue, and someone anonymously left a shiny, gold-colored hose nozzle on my doorstep as a trophy. There was no note, no name, just a silent salute from someone who clearly understood what poetic justice was all about when they saw it. Online, the whole saga had really taken on a life of its own. The video kept racking up more and more views every day. People were making memes about it. Folks were stitching their own Karen stories onto mine, sharing their own experiences with entitled neighbors. One guy even made a parody song, using the slow-motion footage of the sewage spray set to dramatic opera music. Someone else created a graphic novel-style animation that retold the entire event, with exaggerated cartoon versions of Karen and myself as the main characters. Every few days, I'd get another message from a total stranger somewhere in the world, thanking me for standing up to HOA madness, or sharing how my story had inspired them to finally call out their own neighborhood tyrant. I didn't exactly ask for any of the fame, but I wasn't going to lie about it. It did feel pretty good. Still, I never fully let my guard down. I knew that Karen had gone quiet, but I also knew that quiet didn't necessarily mean defeated. It often meant just waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back. Then, one evening, just after sunset, I found an envelope slipped underneath my front door. There was no postage on it, no name on it, just a single sheet of paper folded neatly in half. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "You may have won this time, but this neighborhood won't be yours forever. I'll be back stronger." The handwriting was instantly recognizable. It was the same angry cursive that I had seen on every single HOA complaint form she had ever submitted. I couldn't help but laugh a little, not because I found it particularly funny, but because it was exactly the kind of dramatic, over-the-top thing. Gee, that she would do. The next day, a moving truck appeared in front of her house. There was no warning, no goodbye to the neighbors, nothing. Just a bunch of workers silently packing up all of her potted plants, her outdoor furniture, and that god-awful pink flamingo that she used to keep planted right by the mailbox. She didn't say a single word to anyone. She simply vanished without a trace. Her house was listed for sale by the end of the week, and within days, a young couple with a toddler bought the place and moved in. They introduced themselves to everyone on their very first day, brought over a plate of cookies, and politely asked if it was okay for them to use their own hose hookup now that they were all settled in. I almost burst into tears from the sheer normalcy of it all. But the story didn't quite end there. About a week later, I got an email from a guy named Devin. It turned out that he lived in another HOA clear across town and had somehow ended up with Karen as his new neighbor. Apparently, she had wasted absolutely no time settling back into her old habits. First, it was the complaints about someone's wind chimes being too loud. Then it was about a cat that had dared to walk across her front steps. And finally, wait for it, she was seen dragging yet another neighbor's garden hose across her yard to wash her car with. Devin had somehow stumbled across my viral video online and was asking if I had any tips on how to handle her particular brand of crazy. I told him absolutely everything. I sent him the complete setup plans for my remote valve system, recommended all the camera brands that I had used, and even included a detailed document I had put together called the Karen Defense Protocol. He replied with 3 simple words: "This means war." I didn't hear back from him for a few days after that, but when I finally did, it was glorious. It turned out that Devin had taken my original idea and had run with it, going even further than I had. Instead of sewage, he used a mixture of compost tea and some expired fertilizer, completely natural ingredients, but outrageously foul-smelling. Karen got sprayed again, only this time it was right in front of a group of kids who were playing on their scooters in the street. The footage wasn't quite as clean as mine had been, but it was still hilarious. She screamed, slipped, and ended up falling headfirst into her rose bushes. The video went up online, and within 48 hours, people were already calling it Karen's Revenge, Part 2. The whole saga just continued to spread, and it was then that I realized something both amusing and slightly disturbing about the situation. Karen wasn't just an isolated problem. She was more like a traveling circus of entitlement, infecting every HOA she touched with her particular brand of crazy. But now, thanks to the power of the internet, every time she decided to strike, someone was ready and waiting to strike back. After all of that, I decided to try and make something actually useful out of the whole experience. I started a small blog where I wrote about ridiculous HOA encounters, neighborhood drama, and all kinds of suburban pettiness that people had been dealing with. I never named anyone directly, of course, but everyone knew exactly who the host queen was in my stories. I even turned my security camera footage into a little mini-series, pairing it with anonymous stories that had been submitted to me by other people who had had similar run-ins with Karens. It all grew much faster than I had ever expected. It turned out that a lot of people were just tired of getting pushed around in their own homes, and somehow my ridiculously absurd water war had become the banner that they could finally rally behind. I even started selling a few t-shirts with funny slogans on them, like Hose Before Brothers and Justice Flows. But despite all of that, my favorite part of the whole ordeal wasn't all the messages and comments I was getting online, or even the deep satisfaction of watching Karen slip and slide into her own puddle of karma. It was something much quieter and far more profound. One afternoon, I was out in my backyard just trimming the hedges and enjoying the sunshine, when I suddenly heard the sound of laughter. Real, loud, unfiltered laughter. It was the young couple who had moved into Karen's old house, chasing their toddler around a sprinkler that they had set up on their own lawn, using their own garden hose. The kids were squealing with absolute delight, the parents were laughing right along with them, and no one was stealing water or writing out fines. That, I realized, was the real win here, not the revenge, not the views on the internet, but the peace that had returned to the neighborhood, the return to a place where people respected each other, minded their own business, and just let each other live their lives in peace. And that was something that was worth far more than any garden hose. Each other's space, where the only thing spraying out of a garden hose was water, and definitely not war. As I stood there, with the hose in my hand, I thought about all of the chaos that one simple garden tool had ended up causing. I mean, who would have ever thought that a simple plastic tube and some water pressure could unravel an entire power structure, expose a tyrant, and unite a whole street full of complete strangers? It was all so completely ridiculous. It was poetic in a strange way, and ultimately, it was perfect. I turned the spigot, watched the hose come to life in my hands, and watered my sad little tomato plant just like I used to, peacefully, quietly, and completely free from an audience. And for the first time in a long time, it actually felt like home again. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe and like.